Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Imran and myself today. We will be talking about designing digital retail destinations. My name's Melissa Minko. I am the Global Director of Retail Strategy for digital technology solutions provider CI&T. We do all of the exciting, very challenging back-end solutions for retailers, health and life sciences brands, and FinServe brands as well. Joining me today, I have Imran. You want to introduce yourself?
So Imran Chowdhury, VP of e-commerce here at Threadhopper. We specialize in product discovery and basically power a lot of the class leading brands and retailers globally. So thank you, Melissa, for welcoming me. I think this is the second time our research has kind of come at the same time, which I won't steal your thunder, but I know that you look at it from a consumer perspective. I look at it from a merchandiser's perspective. So it's quite good to see these two things come together.
Exactly. No, our research complements each other really well, not stealing any thunder at all. If anything, just adding to the picture and making for kind of a 360 view or state of the state on the retail industry. So, a little bit more background for our listeners on the survey that I'll be sharing and then the one that you'll be talking about. Every year, CI&T deploys what we call the Connected Retail Survey. This year in particular, it was deployed among 1,039 US consumers. They are pretty proportionately reflective of the US population, and they have to be purchasing online at least once per month. So we know that they are active digital shoppers. We surveyed them a little bit later than we normally do, just so that this research is really fresh into 2025, because obviously there's been a lot of very recent changes in 2025 to the retail landscape. So this survey happened between January 17th and February 3rd. We asked consumers a ton of questions about their typical path to purchase, how they approach it, why they choose certain retailers, and it just really helps us better advise our retail clients when designing the technology that supports their e-commerce experiences. So if you want to kind of explain your research and what you are looking at, that'd be great too.
Yeah, sure. So as you say, as you look at the consumer, and I mean, 1,000 odd survey, that's pretty good going. Well done. Ours is a little bit smaller, but it's still a good spread. So we look at it from a merchandiser's perspective. So the retailers, the actual users that are trying to grow e-commerce sales, and it was about over 200 folks that we surveyed globally of different sizes of e-commerce players, and we kind of categorize them and do a bit of research as to out of those 200 odd retailers, who would we kind of classify as the class leaders, and what are they doing slightly different to the others in terms of how they're managing their product discovery, how they're building a roadmap of areas of focus, time and money and effort, etc., as to where they're kind of targeting and where they think is kind of the future as to how they continue to be those class leaders. So quite a few interesting points given your research today as well.
Definitely. So yeah, we'll kind of start with just the modern path to purchase from the connected retail research perspective, and basically how consumers are approaching digital experiences, how they're navigating to where they want to go. And Imran, I'd just love to hear kind of the parallel outcomes of your research on the industry side as we go through. I think it's incredibly important to pay attention to what the leaders are doing and what really makes them leaders. So how are they kind of focused on what consumers are doing and manifesting that in their digital experiences, or utilizing CI&T and Threadhopper and Crown Peak to do that. So first and foremost, just two overall attitudes that surfaced during the research was one, this idea of focused, kind of mission-oriented paths to purchase. What really stood out to me when I was reflecting on all of the consumer research was that typically we would outline the path to purchase in previous years as going from discovery to research to purchase. But now, because consumers are so well informed, they have so many research mechanisms at their fingertips and they know how to use them. They're really savvy when it comes to making decisions, especially thanks to generative AI tools being, so readily available. Consumers are just way more mobile when they're making decisions, both literally and figuratively. They're definitely using their smartphones, but also just there's a dexterity there that lends itself to now kind of flipping the path to purchase on its head and starting with the research phase And then along the way, kind of discovering other brands that were never on their radar, they had no intention of pursuing or had never, thought of or heard of, but on their research journey, they ended up kind of stumbling upon. So that's something that's been really interesting to see, is just starting in the research phase rather than the discovery phase, and then moving into this openness and this discovery mindset. And then the other key attitude that we've seen that's particularly influencing search behaviors, which is kind of often the beginning of the path to purchase, is this idea of visuals and vibes and just wanting to achieve a certain aesthetic, a very common term these days. Consumers are very specific with what they have in mind and what kind of image they want to portray or how they want to express themselves. So the edits that platforms like Pinterest are helping consumers create for their wardrobe design and for their shopping lists is extremely curated, but it's also often really niche and very descriptive. There for a while, it was like the mermaid aesthetic, the fisherman aesthetic. There's been like cherry red and butter yellow and just like very vivid depictions of what consumers are looking for because they're looking to convey or express a certain feeling through visuals. So just kind of wanted to get your take on this because this is obviously an element of the retail space that you have to immerse yourself in.
Yeah, definitely. There's kind of two camps. The focus mission, they kind of know what they're looking for. They want to find it fast, and very much that fits into make sure your search is rock solid. Yeah. How do you return that focus mission as to how they're trying to describe what they're looking for as fast as possible, so that they can get to the basket? Um, I think we're going to talk a little bit about this because I think the focus mission, especially where we're looking at, say, commoditized products, it's quite difficult. So it is all about efficiency and speed of search results and relevance. But then you get onto the price issue, which I know is a topic for today. I think the other side, though, is more the inspiration, the experience. And I think that's around trying to reinstate your brand or become a brand that's differentiated. It's the age-old story of brand is important. And I think for certain retail verticals, it's probably more important than ever. Being able to relate to your shopper, being able to inspire them. And I love the way you use the term edit, because a lot of our customers who are in that side of retail, so think about fashion or luxury or even beauty. We are talking pretty much daily about edits and about curation and about collections. And, in some ways, a lot of these brands that are really pushing brand story and that brand experience, um, in some ways, their sites, their websites are now becoming editorial. They're
Yeah.
kind of the editorial magazine
Mhm.
that's shoppable. So, like you say, Pinterest, etc., these collections, these curations now being, I guess, reimagined through merchandising on a website. But they do seem very two different camps. One is speed, efficiency. I know what I want, get it to me fast. I know we'll talk about price. And then the other one is kind of inspire me. I want you to relate to me and give me that experience where actually it feels more editorial. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you talked about with websites and just being curated and the goals of them, because there's been a lot of kind of fear mongering around the purpose of a website in the face of these search tools. And I just think it's so important to acknowledge that this was the same dialogue, and in my opinion, it's kind of tired. The same dialogue we had many years ago about brick and mortar. It's dying, it's going away because of online. And that's just not the case. Omnichannel is a term for a reason. And I think it's so important that in this era of search being so refined and fine-tuned and focused, retailers don't forget about their website and in fact prioritize it even more and think about it as a key destination that will be
Yeah.
chosen to arrive at and to look through, just because it may not be the first stop anymore or all the time. It, first of all, it still can absolutely be and will be in many instances, but if that ends up shifting, it's still incredibly relevant to have a well merchandised site because consumers have that expectation. They would never want to show up to a digital platform and have a decline in experience. That's
Yeah.
doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, you use that term shift.
Mhm.
And I do think that in certain retail verticals, and we can talk a little bit as we go through some of your data, certain retail verticals where brand and experience is really important, there is this shift from search centric, let's call it, to story centric,
Mhm.
back to that brand, that differentiation, curation, as it were. So we're definitely seeing that shift, but there's a place for both. There's a place for both, and don't get me wrong, we do search. Search is very much important to us, absolutely.
Mhm.
But we are seeing the class leaders really leaning in to this kind of story-centric approach. It creates that loyalty and it creates that repeat visit and a reason for people to come back to your site versus they thought of something, I want something, are they the cheapest price or shall I go to Amazon? So I think there is that shift depending on different verticals for sure.
Totally. And it's a differentiator, right? That's how a
Mm,
consumer can come to associate an experience with your brand. If there's a level of consistency
yeah.
there, if they feel inspired, if they feel engaged and interested, it's definitely a differentiator. So great. So with that, we'll get into some of the numbers here. So a key factor that we saw this year in particular, but we have been seeing this over the years as a trend for sure. And I'm hesitant to even say trend because it's not going away. In fact, I think price sensitivity will just become even more and more of a factor in consumers' path to purchase, but was just the idea that price is a key decision maker. Last year in our connected retail research, we literally drew a triangle and we had this quality and price and convenience as the three variables. And I would definitely put price kind of at the top of that triangle just because things are times are getting tough for consumers. Things are getting a little tight for consumers. There's a lot of talk about the tariffs, of course. There's just a focus on an awareness of prices that is stronger than it's been in past years. And so for
Yeah.
that, when we ask consumers, what matters most when deciding on a retailer, first and foremost, it does come down to price, but assortment is also incredibly important. You can see here that was the second most common decision driver, which is that they sell the styles of products I always want to buy. And so that goes back to Imran, what you were saying before of just having that consistency of experience, that positive, engaging experience, being able to count on the retailer to offer what you're looking for. I mean, that really is creating this destination for them.
Yeah, it feels like in some verticals it's a race to the bottom, the
Yeah.
cheapest price. I think actually you raise a good point around convenience. People will pay a little bit more for convenience, but kind of the data is showing if you're in a commoditized industry such as let's say white goods or electronics example, um, yeah, you are playing with those two levers of price and convenience. And unfortunately, given the current times, that willingness to pay a little bit more for convenience maybe is starting to kind of thin out a little bit as well, where they'll wait for kind of 3 to 5 working days at a cheaper price versus paying a higher price and getting it the next day. Maybe they'll kind of think about it a bit more. So we are seeing kind of this commoditization for sure. And that convenience piece does come into search. So if you are in those verticals, yeah, that return, that relevance is really important. What I would say though is what you're responding to
Mhm.
should also be something to be thinking about. So, for example, um, we have an electronics good company, and yes, the relevance and speed of the search result is important. But what we've done is kind of because we know that price is still sensitive, but you still want to kind of influence something because we all have our own business KPIs and objectives. Yeah. Is there a strategy behind it? So in the instance with this one in particular, this one category of electronics, yes, they wanted the results to be relevant, but they wanted to boost the products that had the highest margin or the products that had the highest inventory, or the products that actually they needed to improve the stock turn because it was a little bit behind where they wanted it to be. So having some search is still the relevance piece, and the speed of it is important, but having some kind of strategy helps you at least try and get something back as a merchandiser, even if you are kind of battling with the price piece. So having some strategy behind it is very important. It was interesting. It was quite good to see, nearly 20% still value the styles of products that I want to buy. And that kind of comes back to that other horrible buzzword we seem to use, personalization, yeah. Um, and we do have many of our customers that are building collections as part of campaigns, but also building personalized collections that they're using as a way to trigger a customer to come back to them. So personalized for you, for example, on your email campaign now, actually you've got that, yes, 5% still effective. Personalizing a collection specifically to you because we know it's payday soon. you know, it creates that kind of engagement, creates that repeat visit that you want them back on your site versus anyone else. And if it's personalized and they feel as though you understand them, that's valuable for sure.
Yeah, I think what's cool that you're talking about is it's really about deciding which lever to pull when. And if you have a strategy and if you're working with a company that can help you kind of nail down that strategy, you can also be really flexible and you can choose which
Mm,
pull depending on the climate, depending upon, what's going on with the consumer. So I think that's extremely important as well. And I love that you used more of a commoditized example to demonstrate a concept that works for all categories, because there's
yeah.
still a level of attention and thoughtfulness, even in commodities.
Yeah. There is one interesting thing to point out here is that even regardless of the category of retail you're in, different regions have different buying behavior and preferences. Okay. So what we know is, let's say Switzerland. People in Switzerland aren't that price sensitive.
Mhm. Love that for
Yeah,
them.
yeah, good for them.
Yeah.
Um, but folks in Switzerland aren't that price sensitive. So actually, the products that you return in a search result or actually on a product listing page, you can, I hate to use the word, but you kind of can get away with boosting the higher price products there. And that's actually has high propensity to convert because they aren't price sensitive and they are happy to pay a slightly higher price for the newest item or the more quality brand, etc. Versus, and I'll pick on myself, versus the UK,
Mhm.
which right now we are price sensitive. So the products we want to be promoting at the top of those listing pages are probably more in the mid to lower range
Yeah.
because they have a higher propensity to convert. So this price piece is interesting at a global level. I think you're absolutely right. But at a merchandising level, when I speak to our customers, they see differences in locality. And the trick, again, probably a better word than trick, but the secret is how can you still merchandise effectively and at scale, but adapt to those different regions? Because if you can do that, and it's not just all for one, and it is tailored for those different regions, one, customers like it more, they engage more because you understand their in-region preferences. But two, as a merchandiser, because I come from the merchandising side, you have a better chance of growing revenue and optimizing your revenue in that region.
Totally. And I think that's something you and I have talked about in the past too, is that's the beauty of a combination approach of using AI, but also using merchants'
Mm,
knowledge that they've accumulated over time and the level of expertise they have in their category across their consumers. Because there are certain pieces that it's almost merchant intuition, if you will, but it's, data backed, that
mm,
it's so invaluable and therefore important to be able to combine those two forces of tech and human for these models.
yeah,
Awesome.
definitely.
So this next slide kind of just reiterates what we've just been talking about, that price is really important, but also the importance of convenience. So this question in particular wasn't just about when you're deciding on a retailer, but what actually brings you back to the retailer? What is a key component or a factor in the loyalty equation? So you see that ease and convenience kind of rise to the top. And something I didn't get to mention actually, Imran, when you mentioned convenience before, I've always had this theory, and I really stand by it, that convenience isn't necessarily about saving time. I think a lot of times it's about saving mental energy. So sometimes when I'm buying something, it may take me longer to go that route, but I can rely on it. I can count on it. I know I'm going to end up with the products that I want. Or it may even be a little more expensive, but it'll feel less mentally taxing than a different process. So I think that's really important to think about from a digital perspective. What does modern day convenience look like? How are you actually making things easier and taking the thinking out of it for consumers?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, my story of that one brand that I met, and I typed in men's white t-shirt in this, and I got something like 2,000 men's white t-shirts.
Yeah,
And for me, my brain can't deal with that. My brain just can't deal with that. Kind of give me maybe 10, and that's enough for me. So you do get that kind of choice paradox and that brain block for sure. Yeah.
exactly. That level of ease, helping you make a quick decision, so empowering. And I do think that's, kind of a lot of the appeal for many people of generative AI these days is they feel like a lot of that mental energy kind of gets taken away a little bit. And so I think that that's the piece that you can certainly automate in a lot of ways, but then you want to balance it out and complement it with a really quality experience where they feel inspired or they feel engaged when
Yeah.
they're needing that editorial piece. So great. So moving right along, we can talk a little bit more about this idea that research is happening first and then you have discovery. So we kind of alluded to this before. We talked about the fact that, search has been a hot topic now for the last year, thanks to generative AI. But what's just so interesting is the retailer being a destination still very much matters. It just matters at a different phase along the path to purchase. And to be honest, I actually think it could be seen as a positive that the retailer destination is happening a little bit later in the shopping journey, because what that means is you have them at a point that's closer to conversion, right? Because the later you engage with them, the closer they are most likely to buying. So starting with research and then moving into discovery, and that being where they end up on your retailer page, is incredibly important. So this was our question about which channel are you kind of going to when it comes to the actual purchase or the actual buy. And you can see those top three choices are retailer destinations, whether that's the Amazon website, the Amazon app, or a retailer's website. So, I mean, the fact that the retailer website made it into the top three and surpassed Google at this point of the path to purchase is incredibly important, and just speaks to
Mm.
what you were saying earlier of make sure it's edited, make sure it's sartorial, curated, something that they want to see that helps make that decision faster, but at a higher level of engagement.
Yeah, that kind of giving people a reason to come back to your site, the editorial magazine, as it were, concept,
Mhm.
um, it is definitely on the rise for certain brands and proving very successful. Um, so I'll give you kind of one example. There's a really great retail brand here that we look after called River Island. So fashion brand, men's, women's. Actually, I think they're international, and they're amazing at creating these collections. And there was one that always caught my eye, and it was jeans and a nice top. That's what the collection was called. And
The unicorn.
actually, yeah, and actually, as a let's say a woman shopper that's going out for the weekend, that actual tagline of, "Oh, I need some jeans and a nice top," it's just used, yeah. And they create a collection, and it's great because people keep coming back to it, and it's relevant. It's in the language um, that a shopper would use. It's in the context the shopper of their journey, and you're providing it in editorial kind of quality. And it's just simple things like, well, they're not simple because to build these and scale them, you need a tool like ours, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you can do it, it's really, really effective. And giving them a reason to come back to your site, kind of, and bypassing this waiting for them to have a focused mission, giving them a reason to be inspired and hopefully purchase it is great. Just on this, if I can.
Yeah.
So I don't think I told you this. So this whole concept around generative, and I think it was on your last slide, kind of on this side. So one of our other customers, like about a week ago, speaking to them, and he gave me a really interesting stat because we were talking about the rise of generative AI. Chat GPT, is it a threat in terms of search? Yeah. So traditionally, brands would spend way too much on Google Ads to be found. There is a rise in terms of Chat GPT. And I said, people aren't going to be using Google as much and they're just going to come straight to the PDP page. And he said, actually, we're already seeing it. He
Mhm.
said something crazy like 70% of the traffic hitting his site is going to the PDP. And he said it's a stark difference to previous years. And he said, I think this is only going to rise. It's already a significant amount of our traffic.
Mhm.
And he said, that's why we're focusing so much on merchandising with you,
Yeah.
because I don't want someone, be it Google or GPT, whatever. If someone's just coming to my PDP, fine. They're coming to my site, great. But I want to keep them on either a discovery loop or a discovery journey. So for me, he said, I'm probably spending most of my team's time and effort in merchandising the site through visual cues.
Mhm.
So when they hit a PDP, they don't just look at it, it's not right for me, and bounce. They look at it and they're kind of nudged through cues, be it visually similar or shop the look or a piece of editorial content. He said, I just want to keep them on my site and keep nudging them along through the discovery journey before they purchase. I want to try and find every little opportunity to keep them on my site versus hit my PDP from that channel and then go. He said, if I can keep them on the site, I can get them into the discovery journey and hopefully get them to buy into my brand story. And that was his thing. I'm creating a brand story, but customers want to keep coming back to.
Exactly that. Well, and that's the thing is, I think you can either be, as a retailer, you can either be terrified hearing that the beginning of the journey is ChatGPT or some generative AI, or you can be excited and see it as an opportunity to get your house in order so that when now all these consumers who maybe never thought of you in the first place are discovering you because they've moved from that research phase to the discovery phase, they want to come back. They're excited by what they see. They feel seen, they feel understood. Kind of going back even to
Mm,
that jeans and a nice top, like that is a retailer that knows their customer, right? So
yeah,
this the opportunity is get your house in order because you're actually going to have access to more consumers than maybe your reach allowed before because of these search tools that consumers are using first. So I actually do think it's a really positive thing, but the call to action then is very clear. It's don't let them end up on your site by accident and hate what they're seeing, right? It's kind of the equivalent
yeah,
of don't have a messy brick and mortar store. They'll never want to come back if they have a hard time then finding what they were initially on that mission to find. So,
yeah, yeah, definitely. And in our research this year, so we publish it like every 2 years. And we in product discovery world in the market, is everything. That's what everyone talks about. Search, search, search. And I think actually we're seeing this shift in that yes, you do have to have good search, but actually for certain retail verticals, that shift to merchandising, the story, et cetera, is actually really important. And this year was actually, we saw the highest growth of those retail leaders focusing on two elements, controlling merchandising and visual merchandising. Both of those were over 90%. So
mhm.
those brands are starting to shift to the merchandising side because they're seeing that's the way to differentiate and reinstate their brand. And from a search perspective, actually, with a lot of the AI technologies we've got right now, they're kind of all generally very, very similar. So as long as you've got good search, kind of it's done its job, find a provider that can optimize it, great. go focus your tacit knowledge as a merchandising team to go and find and build that brand story through merchandising. And we're seeing that shift from our study as those that we classified in the retail leaders, those that are seeing the highest growth and highest repeat customers.
Totally. Makes a ton of sense.
Mm.
Fantastic. Well, I think we can just conclude here. This has been a pretty comprehensive discussion, but I think, the biggest takeaway when we were preparing for this conversation was just this idea that now we are in an era of precision when it comes to appealing to the consumer, and leading retailers understand the level of focus, but also level of inspiration consumers are likely desiring. So how can you kind of match that energy with your digital experience? Hopefully, leaving this conversation, our listeners feel that they have some good ideas. But yeah, any parting thoughts you want to leave them with as well?
Don't be afraid of the AI conversation either.
Yeah,
I know I speak to a lot of merchandisers that don't want to dip into AI because they're worried about controlling it. And the control piece is really important. But, if you've got the right tools and partners like yourselves, there is this way to use AI as a co-pilot, and you're using that as a co-pilot, but you as a merchandiser is in control and building the kind of the journey and the path for it to follow, because we're all really busy these days, Melissa, and we all need a little bit of help to take away some of the heavy lift. So my only last comment is, don't, as a merchandiser, don't be afraid of the AI, be aware of it, but leverage it in the right way to control the journey that you want to craft and the brand you want to go build.
that's perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited for
No
people
problem.
to
Thank you.